is divorce. And when you think about it, obviously in some senses this makes sense. You've heard the phrase, of course, cheaper to keep her, which is when, a lot of guys think, I'm not going to get divorced after all, because you remember what Eddie Murphy was talking about, half, right? If you get divorced, you're going to give up at least half. Some people give up half and then some, frankly, because divorce has a long-lasting negative financial implications. It's not just that you might give up half of your assets or have to share a portion of your income even. It's that down the road, you might be compelled to pay alimony, child support. You might have to support 2 households, whereas before there was just one. So it's almost like everything from a cost standpoint gets doubled, and then from an income standpoint, it gets cut in half.
Right.
So, divorce takes a financial toll. I read somewhere once, and I don't know if this is true, but I've been through a divorce financially, and I was on the paying end of the equation, where I paid my ex-spouse more money than I even cared to share, but it was a lot.
Wow.
But I read once that they said, when divorce drags on, it's even more financially tumultuous, that for every 1 year that you go through a divorce, that it takes at least 3 years financially to recover.
Wow.
So if your divorce drags on, for example, 2 years, the theory goes, it's going to take you about a full 6 years to kind of recover and get back to where you were. So, that's just one word of wisdom. Obviously I wouldn't wish divorce on anybody just from a personal standpoint, but definitely financially speaking, if you can keep it together, you might want to just try to work it out with your mate.
Wow, work it out. That's a novel idea, Bobby. Like exactly. Bobby Glanton.
Stop subscribing to the throwaway mentality. I know we see, celebrities and whatnot and others who, they might be married 78 days or maybe even 78 months, which might be long, I guess, by Hollywood standards. But, sometimes I do think people don't fight hard enough. And again, you're talking to a person who's gone through a divorce myself. I was, previously married for 13 years. I've since remarried and am happily and successfully married now, and definitely got it right the second time around. But I do think that sometimes, maybe it's because of youth and inexperience, immaturity, lack of proper role models, financial issues and woes, a whole bunch of problems that make couples call it quits a little too quickly.
Right.
But I do know this, that divorce attorneys and other experts who are specializing in that marital litigation say that 70% of all couples who divorce cite financial strife and money problems as one big reason as part of their breakup.
Well, Bobby Glanton-Smith has a question for you, Lynnette. Bobby, go ahead.
Sure.
Yeah, I want to preface that question with an observation. Post OJ, it's cheaper to kill her.
What, Bobby? What, Bobby?
We would hope that people won't go there, but
if it's a financial consideration, it is truly cheaper if you can get away with it to just murder her.
Come on,
please
Bobby.
don't listen.
But
to
having
Bobby's
said that, I was just to lighten up the moment. I'm curious.
That darkened the moment, Bobby.
Well,
the moment is dark as hell now because of you.
Well, I didn't kill nobody and wouldn't do it because it's not my thing to do that. But my question to you, sister, is this. How did you rid yourself of $100,000 in debt?
Great question, Bobby.
That is a great question. So, Zoe, you alluded to me having $100,000 in credit card debt alone. This was back in 2001. And like you said, I paid it all off in 3 years. I never missed a single payment. Then I wrote this book about it called Zero Debt, The Ultimate Guide to Financial Freedom. It went on to become a New York Times bestseller, and obviously we did a lot of, media and promotion and all that good stuff. First, you got to know how I got into debt. Most people get into debt in one of two ways. Either they're a victim of one of the dreaded Ds, which is downsizing, divorce, a death in the family of the main breadwinner, disability, or disease. If any one of those 5 things happens to you, trust me, you're going to run into some financial problems, and in a lot of cases, it throws people into debt. Although I've personally been through 2 of the dreaded Ds, I've been downsized, I've been through a divorce, I can't say that those are the things that threw me into debt. In fact, I was already in debt when I was in the middle of my downsizing. I was already in debt when I was going through my divorce.
Mm-hmm.
What happened to me, though, is I was the other half of the equation. I don't blame the dreaded D's for throwing me into debt. It was my own fiscal mismanagement. I was a classic overspender. And so the folks who haven't gone through one of those situations where they kind of got to hit financial rock bottom are typically either, sort of poor money managers or overspenders. And for me, it really was a case that I didn't have my financial priorities right and that I was kind of in denial, to be honest with you, about the problem that was my spending habits and my debt. I was in denial because I had a six-figure job. I was, a Wall Street Journal reporter for CNBC. I was on air. I was making a great salary. I actually had a substantial retirement nest egg saved. My 401k had six figures in it. I paid all my bills on time. No bill collectors ever called me or had to hunt me down. I was making minimum payments, mind you, but I was paying everything on time. So even though I had life insurance and disability protection, I created a will in case something happened to me, to say what should happen to my kids and all that. So I was doing a lot of things right, but when it came to my spending, it was just out of control. And so because I was in that mindset that what's the problem? Everybody getting paid is, yeah, I got this. I didn't even really want to add it up because I didn't really want to know. So, but when I finally did, of course, face reality and sit there and list everything, I said, oh, this is a big problem and I got to fix this.
Wow. So
what I did to get out of the debt, frankly, were a multitude of strategies. First thing I did was call up all my creditors and negotiate. So, if you're paying interest on top of the principal amount that you've charged on your credit card debt, it makes it, extremely difficult to get out of debt, especially when you have a whopping amount of debt like I had. So because I actually had a good track record, I had paid all my, bills on time, I had leverage, and I was able to negotiate all of my credit card interest rates down to very low single-digit rates. In some cases, I even had 0%. So nothing was above 4.9%. I had several at 4.9%, 2.9%, and zero interest rates. So that helped me because I didn't have to keep paying the interest on top of the principal amount I was paying also. I also started doubling and tripling the minimum payments that I was making. So, I know now that minimum payments in the short run, which is what most of us try to do to get by, that really just means maximum payments in the long run because you're just going to keep making the credit card companies rich by giving them additional amounts of interest over time. So once I got out of that mentality of paying the minimum payment and falling into that trap, I started knocking out my debts a lot more quickly.
Wow.
I did other things, too, like renegotiate my auto loan. I refinanced my auto loan that I had at the time. Again, this was, back in the early 2000s. I had a 2002 Toyota Highlander. It's the same car that I drive today. It's 2014, obviously. My car is long, almost 9 or 10 years been paid off now. And I'm still driving the same car because I like not having a car payment.
Right.
And but I had a negotiation with my auto finance company at the time, and I got my interest rates on my car loan knocked down, so that made my payment there more manageable, freeing up more money to put towards the credit card debt.
So, Lynnette,
I started cutting out all the frivolous spending I was doing. Before, I would just, if I want to go to the Caribbean or go on vacation, I would just say, okay, let's roll out, everybody.
Let's do it.
And I would just put it on a credit card and worry about how I was going to pay for it later or just pay with minimum payments later.
Right.
So I stopped stuff like that.
So, Lynnette, let me ask you this question really quickly because a lot of our fans want to know where they can find you. What is your website? What is a direct means where people can contact you, email, whatever? They want to know where you are. Please give us that website really quickly.
Sure. My free financial advice site is askthemoneycoach.com. So if you go on askthemoneycoach.com, you'll see I have, 1,500 or so articles up there where I've written about, virtually every money topic under the sun. So if you have questions, you can certainly look for the content and the articles and the videos that I have posted there, or you can write me and ask a question on there. If it's something, a subject I haven't tackled, I'll go ahead and answer your question. People who want coaching, the one-on-one coaching, they can reach me through there as well. My coaching services are not free. Those are paid, of course.
Yeah, exactly.
But really, just for the information and advice and whatnot, the best route to reach me is askthemoneycoach.com.
And
folks can email also at info@askthemoneycoach.com.
Got it. And what is your latest book? And Bobby wants to ask a quick question on the way out to break.
Sure. My latest book is Perfect Credit, 7 Steps to a Great Credit Rating. And it's all about how to navigate the credit scoring world. If you have credit problems, bad credit, if you want to improve your credit rating, it's critical in today's modern society to have a great credit rating, not just because you get lower interest rates and on credit cards, loans, student loans, car notes, and all that, but also because it can help you in the workplace to get a job, to rent a place, even to get lower insurance rates. My 11th book that I'm actually working on right now is a book on how to pay for college without going broke. It's called College Secrets.
Well, listen, we got to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to let Bobby ask you that question. So what morning shows? We're talking about money, management, and mistakes. She's going to tell us a couple of mistakes, too, when we come back. We'll be back.
Scam behind the curtain and just how it affects you. Every modern society creates currency in pretty much the same way. But since the U.S. dollar is the majority of the world's currency, I'm going to use the United States as our example. It all starts when some politician says, vote for me and I'll make sure the government provides you more free stuff than my opponent will. But there's no such thing as a free lunch. So to provide that supposedly free stuff, the politicians vote for the country to spend more than its income. This is called deficit spending. To pay for that deficit spending, the Treasury borrows currency by issuing a bond. So what's a bond? If you think about it, a bond is really nothing but a glorified IOU. It's a pretty piece of paper with numbers printed on it that says, loan me $1 trillion today, and I promise over a 10-year period I'm going to pay you back that $1 trillion plus interest. But what you need to understand is that Treasury bonds are our national debt. These glorified IOUs are to be paid back by you and I and our descendants through future taxation. Therefore, when the government issues a bond, it steals prosperity out of the future so that it can spend it today. The Treasury then holds a bond auction, and the world's largest banks show up and compete to buy part of our national debt and make a profit on it by earning interest. You'll notice that as we move through this process, the big banks are there, taking a cut every step of the way. This isn't by chance, as you'll see shortly. Then, through a shell game called open market operations, the banks get to sell some of those bonds to the Federal Reserve at a profit. To pay for the bonds, the Federal Reserve opens up its big old checkbook and writes bad, bogus, counterfeit checks that should bounce because they're drawn on an account that always has a zero balance. There isn't one penny in there. To quote from the Boston Federal Reserve, when you or I write a check, there must be sufficient funds in our account to cover that check. But when the Federal Reserve writes a check, there is no bank deposit on which that check is drawn. When the Federal Reserve writes a check, it is creating money. The Fed then hands those checks to the banks, and at this point, currency springs into existence. The banks then take that currency and buy more bonds at the next Treasury auction. But what is a check? A check is also an IOU. When you write a check, you're making a note that says, here's my IOU for cash. All you have to do is go to the bank and pick it up. Now, it's very, very important that you understand this process because we're going to come back later and show you the devastating effect this has on you. The Treasury issues IOUs, bonds. The banks then buy those IOUs with currency. The Federal Reserve then writes IOUs, checks, and hands them to the banks in exchange for the Treasury's IOUs, the bonds. And currency is created. So what's really happening is the Federal Reserve and the Treasury are just swapping IOUs, using the banks as middlemen, and abracadabra, presto, currency magically springs into existence. This process repeats and repeats over and over again, enriching the banks and indebting the public by raising the national debt. The end result is that there's a buildup of bonds at the Federal Reserve and currency at the Treasury. This process is also where all paper currency comes from. The Federal Reserve and the government mistakenly call it base money because they didn't watch episode 1 of this series and they don't know the difference between money and currency. But I will correctly refer to it as base currency because it is not money. It is currency, and as we've learned, there is a big difference.